This is Cloud's Buster Sword from Final Fantasy VII. But how effective would Cloud's sword be in real life? Let's find out. In Final Fantasy VII, Cloud always has this sword on his back, and he wields it very easily with either two hands or even sometimes using one hand. But in real life, the Buster Sword would be really heavy if it was made out of full steel, like this metal replica from Final Fantasy VII, the remake. This one weighing about 15 pounds is manageable, but realistically, would you really want to use this in battle? In actual combat, if you were wielding something this heavy, you'd have to be really strong to wield it really fast like Cloud does, or have enough strength to wield this like it's no problem. First, let's look at the design. So with the Buster Sword being a rounded handle, you'd really have to practice with your edge alignment to keep the blade going straight on to the target. But would you really need edge alignment with this big of a sword? Because of the sheer weight on a Buster Sword, I don't really think you would need it that sharp to do damage. Automatically, this is gonna either move the person's weapon aside, do some real damage to the person's armor or shields, and if it's not dropping the person to the ground, they're gonna fly away. Let's go into some of the basic strikes with the Buster Sword. So going straight down with the Buster Sword is not really a problem, but you gotta make sure that you're strong enough to keep the blade up so that it doesn't automatically hit the ground. As for diagonal strikes, downward is not an issue. Diagonally going across like this, not a problem. The problem comes in when you're doing these upper diagonal strikes. It's really coming back at you with some resistance when you're going up. The blade seems to pull your arms down, so you gotta have really good strength to swing it up and come back to position. You could do swings like this, but I don't think it would be as good of an idea because it's gonna come in very slow, and the weight coming down is not gonna be very good for an actual combat situation. But these horizontal strikes would be devastating if you managed to catch somebody or even catch their weapon, because with the weight on the Buster Sword, it's easily gonna move their weapon out of the way or it's gonna drop them to the ground. In my opinion, the best strikes to do with the Buster Sword would be either straight down, causing significant damage overhead, or doing some of these horizontal strikes where you can easily come back and recover to another diagonal strike down. But once you go into these uppercut strikes, there's too much weight on the Buster Sword for you to keep it upright and manage to have a good recovery for another strike. So if you're managing to use a Buster Sword and you have the strength to wield one, downward strikes or horizontal strikes all day. Going into the guard with a Buster Sword, the only thing I'd advise with a Buster Sword is having your finger right here on this rib about an inch away. Because if you have your hand all the way up against the guard, you take any impact, whether you're hitting something or something's hitting the Buster Sword, it's really gonna push up against your knuckles and hands and possibly cause an injury to yourself. So always make sure, if you're using a Buster Sword, at least an inch or two away from the top so that you can do a lot better swings and not take any impact against your knuckles. Also, if you do any type of swing, a specific swing, or you're trying to do something like this, where the Buster Sword's gonna hit your wrist or forearm, that's one big downside, I think, with this big of a blade and guard. So the guard on a Buster Sword could be a problem, but if you know how to use it and get around it, it's not that big of an issue. So as for thrusting with the Buster Sword, I don't think it would be the best because of the design of the tip, not to mention the weight holding up the Buster Sword would be a big issue, because if you try to come in with a thrust and somebody manages to get away and around the Buster Sword, just tap it at the top, it's easily gonna drop the Buster Sword lower, and the Buster Sword might not be at a good position at that point. One big question with the Buster Sword: can you wield it with one hand like Cloud? I cannot. Even the strongest guy wouldn't really be able to wield it one-handed effectively. This is too much mass, and it would easily damage your wrist or cause injury. Even if you're really strong, I don't think it's the best option to have a one-handed strike, because with two hands would be a lot more efficient and it would be easier to recover if you missed. So the way Cloud blocks in Final Fantasy VII, the remake, he goes like this with his Buster, kind of acting like a shield. I'd have to run some tests to see if this guarding technique would be effective with the Buster Sword. So I found somebody to throw some rocks at me. We're gonna see how this goes. Not that bad. Another thing while using the Buster Sword that you would really want to work on is your footwork and your stances. If you have a solid stance with the Buster Sword, it would be a lot better than if you were to just have the Buster Sword out here and swing. Your body's just not gonna have the right leverage and footing to keep you upright. You might end up flying away with the swing. So if you're working with the Buster Sword or a big sword like this that's really heavy, you definitely wanna work on your footwork and stances to keep yourself upright and stable. Another thing with any type of big sword, you definitely wanna work on some hand positioning and different switches while you're doing your swings. Because if you do manage to swing this way, it'd be better off to switch your hand position to come back faster and a lot stronger, depending on the area you're swinging and the direction you're trying to go in. Now let's go through some stances with the Buster Sword. I think if you were to have the Buster Sword like this, straight up, it would actually be pretty nice because the weight doesn't really come down on your hands. This would be a good neutral position for the Buster Sword because you could easily let the sword fall down or swing it up, or even go into a horizontal or diagonal strike. This one right here is just too much. Having the sword like this is too much weight on your body and the sword just wants to drop. So for me, this is not the best option for a Buster Sword. It requires too much strength to hold it up effectively enough to continue a battle. Now, how about this one right here, where you have the Buster Sword kind of on the side? This is not so bad, but it still puts a lot of strain on your wrist. So unless the sword is resting on the floor like this, I don't think that this is the best option because it's either gonna damage your blade or it's just coming down too heavy for you to come back up with an actual strike. This position could be good if you manage to catch somebody with one of these horizontal strikes and then come back with something else. But as for effectiveness and a quick draw, I don't think that this right here would be the best. At the end of the day, I think either resting on your shoulder so that you can come down with a strong strike downward or horizontal would be the best option, or the first stance that we had where you have the sword straight up and the weight is just pushing down slightly so it's not too much of a hindrance on your strikes or comeback. So for effectiveness, I think the Buster Sword would not be the best weapon to use for combat. Yes, it will definitely cause major damage on impact. If you do manage to get one of these big swings and catch somebody, it'd be pretty crazy. But for me personally, I would not use the Buster Sword. I do think it's an awesome weapon, and I really do like Final Fantasy VII, but for me, I'd probably use a different weapon from the Final Fantasy universe. So what do you think? Is Cloud's Buster Sword effective for combat, or would you use a different one? Let me know if you want me to cover a different video game or anime weapon in my next video.